Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are back with another very interesting Hasbro Jurassic World release. Kinda weird that I would jump to this guy over the original version of the Indominus from Hasbro, which I will do a review on eventually, is the original version, but I chose this version because there is actually a brand new Indominus Rex coming from Mattel within the next, 2 months or so. Basically, I think on June 1st, I'm pretty sure is when it releases. And the new Mattel version looks strikingly similar to this one, again in the Jurassic World Reimagined line, which is, pretty much what that Reimagined line is all about. But this is definitely one of the biggest, if not the biggest overall, when it comes to the Hasbro Jurassic World line. It's definitely, to my recollection, the largest in the Dino Hybrids line. And you might be wondering what in the heck is going on, because the Indominus Rex is already a hybrid, so it didn't really need anything to kind of, snazz it all up like we have here, but they chose to make the Indominus Rex somehow even more of a hybrid. I don't know how they did it, but they did apparently, and it caused it to create some red coloration and everything on it, and spikes on the body, which is an interesting choice. But I'm going to go ahead, readjust the camera, and then we'll get a closer look. So starting here in the head sculpt of the Indominus Rex, I would say the head sculpt, if you take away the spikes and everything over the top of the head, is probably better on this Indominus than it is on the original version of the Indominus from Hasbro, because the focus camera, why is it not focusing correctly? But the original Indominus has a bit of a goofy look to it, I think, and of course this one does as well, considering it is a Hasbro Jurassic World figure. But it just looks like, if you took the spikes off of the top of the head there and just kind of took an overall look at the head sculpt, I feel like it definitely looks a bit closer to what the Indominus Rex actually looks like compared to the other version. But you can see when you get nice and close, you do have some decent skin texture here in the face. For the most part, I don't think it looks too bad. Maybe slightly muted, like up here on the tip of the snout. Definitely has a little bit of a muted look. We also have some okay coloration here, as we have like a light gray or off-white for the primary body color. We also have some dark browns that show up in like the palette, the eye socket and stuff as you move back. You have a red eye with a black pupil and then a white spot to kind of give it the eye shine rather than, just actually hitting it with a gloss coat. And then you of course have the red that moves up and over the top of the head of the Indominus Rex. You can see the detail up there on the top of the head as well. Looks pretty decent, and definitely has an interesting look with all of these spikes and everything that move over the top of the head, or ridges, or whatever you'd like to call it. Again, obviously showing that our Indominus Rex is quite the interesting hybrid on top of being a hybrid. We do have an articulated jaw, and as you can see, when the jaw opens, we get some very snake-like fangs that kind of extend out. So I was waiting for that. Obviously, the figure makes a whole lot of noises, but as you open the mouth, you'll see those extend again. Right there, they pop out. So that's kind of neat as far as like a little play feature of the figure. And I apologize if you see paint on my fingers at all. I was just painting recently and chose to come over here and review this while some paint dries on a model I'm working on. But you can see again the teeth are here and there, like they're not perfectly following along the jawline. They're kind of, hit or miss as far as where they are placed, and also painted with a light yellowish tone. You can see the teeth on the lower jaw look kind of similar, but really quite small, but pretty much the same style where they kind of pop up here and there. And then you just have a cluster of interesting teeth here in the front of the mouth. You can see the tongue sculpted out on the inside of the mouth, everything painted with a dark purplish tone. A little bit of detail on the inside of the mouth up there, but not really a whole lot. And I feel like this review is going to be fun just based on the fact that this Indominus Rex never stops yelling. But as we move back a little bit further, you can see some kind of armored scoots following along, up near the back, near the reddish areas. You can see a little area of articulation right here, and obviously that creates the noise, but that will also be part of the action feature that we will take a look at a little bit later. As we lead back, we have that reddish tone kind of leak down and kind of like patterned down into the side of the dinosaur. It definitely looks cool, I will say that, and I was always quite drawn to this figure prior to actually owning it because of the fact that the coloration is pretty cool on it. It's definitely eye-catching, there's no doubt about that. But as you move back into the body, you can see the skin texture continues to look okay, but of course muted in certain areas as you move down. Like some areas gets pretty vibrant, like specifically right here on this button, you can see the detail looks pretty decent, but then when you move up here to the neck, it's pretty muted and everything right there and kind of smoothed out, which doesn't really look very good. As you lead down into the arm sculpt, you can see the skin texture does look okay. You've got a few more ridges kind of leading off of the back of the arm. And as we transition into the hand, we randomly end up with like a gold coloration, which I always felt like was super weird and random. No nail paint, unfortunately, but the finger sculpts and everything look okay, I guess. As you move along the underside of the Indominus, you do as well have more of that gold coloration that picks up in the bottom of the neck and throat and then leads out but ends before we reach the tail. So a little bit of like a taste of Mattel here from Hasbro, and you'll see that here just with the coloration that ends before we reach the tail, which is also, you know, we say Mattel-like, but maybe I guess we should be saying Hasbro-like because apparently they were doing it first, although I think in general companies have always kind of done that. But as you continue to lead back, you still see more of the reddish patterning and stuff, more of the standard skin texture of this figure, again with kind of like some scoots and stuff moving along. You can see a few more spikes up here popping up into the back, which are actually a white tone, the same, you know, primary body color we have for the Indominus. As we move down here into the leg, you can see the skin texture definitely looks really quite muted. As we move down here through the course of the leg, I would say overall, that's probably some of the most muted detail. Why is my camera really not focusing on that right there? Some of the most muted detail that we see in the body of the figure as a whole, with only a few scales kind of popping up down here at the bottom of the calf muscle. You can kind of make out the knee, but we also have some very large rocky scoots moving over the front of the leg. We do as well have the Jurassic World stamp. As you move down into the foot sculpt, you can see the foot sculpt looks okay. You've got some scoots moving down the toes. Again, a random gold coloration, but I feel like the detail does pick up a bit as you lead down into the ankle and the foot, which is pretty nice. The nails, again, do not have any paintwork on them, unfortunately, but we do at least have dew claws. And then we lead back up here into the tail, and as you lead out into the tail, you can see that that red patterning is now non-existent. As you lead along, you don't have any more of that occurring. The tail does have a curve as you lead out there toward the end of the tail. The tail is also quite a bit shorter than you would expect to see, like definitely way shorter than you would want for an Indominus Rex, and I almost dropped it as I turned it around. Of course, when it comes to Hasbro, once we turn it around, we do start to pick up a few screw holes on this side of the figure. You can see the head sculpt, of course, looks the same over here as what we had seen on the first side. As you move down through the body, we continue to have the same style of skin texture, same patterning and stuff. You do have the arm again right here, which looks maybe pretty similar but a little bit different from the other side, but this one does just have straight up regular articulation, which is just forward and back. The other side is part of the action feature, but you can see the fingers are kind of flexible, which is kind of neat, I guess. But as you move back here, the biggest difference you're going to see is the fact that the leg is kind of taking a step forward on this side compared to trailing on the other side. But one thing you will notice is this gold coloration is very inconsistent. It doesn't even cover this toe on that foot, and I don't know if it did for the other side. Nope. So there you go, you can see again, it also did not cover that side either. So I knew it was going to do it, I knew he was going to yell. Let's just let him get it out of his system. But as you move along, again, screw holes galore on this side, which are pretty ugly. The leg sculpt, though, does have the same muted look as what we had seen on the first side, with the detail, again, picking up as you lead down into these really oddly golden feet. And then you again lead out into the tail, which is definitely quite a bit too short. As far as the leg articulation goes, you do have some okay leg articulation. I'm trying to find a good spot to hold it, so you can see that's about as far back as it goes. That's about as far forward. And then this side, that is about as far forward. And it goes back fairly far, which is nice. But that's really about it as far as that goes. So not a whole lot when it comes to the leg articulation. And again, this is part of the action feature, so we'll get to that in a moment. The tail has like some wiggling that occurs, but I haven't been able to figure out any form of actual articulation for that area. You also, again, have this button here in the stomach, and once you press that button, as you can see, some golden spikes pop up, or yellow spikes, I guess you could say. It almost looks like McDonald's gold coloration here, but you can see some spikes pop up in the back of the dinosaur, and then you press the button and then they disappear back down into the dinosaur. We'll do that again. Obviously showing that the Indominus Rex is basically continuing to evolve, I guess. That would be the goal. And then we also have another action feature, so you basically have to pull the arm down a few times. I don't think this works too well on mine anymore, but we'll go ahead and give it a shot. I stopped early. Nah, not really. Not working too well. Let me go ahead and see if I can readjust this for a moment. So I just kind of wanted to lean the Indominus Rex a little bit and see if maybe that helps. So, not working too well in its old age, but as you can see, it's supposed to kind of keep chomping like this and making noises, which we can very clearly hear. That's basically the action feature that we have for this figure. I also heard somebody mentioning that there was like a red light on it, but I have yet to ever actually see that. So, if it does have the red light, it never pops up on mine. May or may not have that. I don't know. That's just what I had heard about the figure, but I've never seen... Man, this thing loves to yell. I've never seen a red light on mine. As far as a size goes, it's going to be tough because it has really poor balance, but for a length from the snout to the tail, you're looking at about 22 inches or 56 centimeters. Now, the height is dependent on the way you position it, because you could... Actually, I'm going to have to set him down again and stand the camera up a little bit further. So when he's standing right here, which I feel like is a fairly comfortable position, you're looking at about a foot, so around 12 inches or about 30.5 centimeters. Now, again, being an articulated figure, you can kind of prop it up higher or lower depending on your preference. But for a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, Robert Muldoon, and the Collect Day Human Being next to our Indominus Rex hybrid from Hasbro. And you can see that it does still have a pretty darn impressive size to it. It's quite large overall. And as I already mentioned, I believe is potentially the largest of the Hasbro Jurassic World figures that they had released. Now, there are quite a few Indominus Rex that were released by Hasbro. Here's another smaller version with their kind of dino damage or battle damage version that I actually have reviewed on the channel previously as well, which you can see again is quite a bit smaller. And I will be doing a review of the standard version of the Indominus Rex from Hasbro at some point in the near future. So once I do, I'll probably bring this one back in for a size comparison with the regular Indominus in that video. But for another comparison, here is the Mattel Jurassic World Extreme Chompin' T-Rex next to the Indominus Rex from Hasbro, and as you can see, the Indominus is obviously quite a bit larger than the Extreme Chompin' T-Rex, but that is, of course, one of the smaller Mattel Tyrannosaurs, so once you start to get into some larger sized T-Rex, I feel like they'd catch up pretty quickly. And just for an example of that, here is the Mattel Jurassic World Epic Roarin' T-Rex next to the Indominus, and very clearly you can now see that they are quite similar in size overall. And then for one final comparison, we have the Mattel Jurassic World Indominus Rex next to the Hasbro version. Now, this is the first version of the Indominus that Mattel had released. They had released a smaller version later on, but obviously we are more so based and focused on the larger version because, as you can see, the larger version matches up very nicely in size to the Hasbro version. So if you do have the standard, older version of the Indominus from Mattel, you're going to have a pretty darn good idea of the size of the Hasbro version if you don't have the Hasbro version in your collection already. As you can see, they are very similar in size. So Hasbro, without a shadow of a doubt, is responsible for some of the absolute worst Jurassic World figures, Jurassic figures in general. Like, if we go through the entire Jurassic toy line from start to finish, Hasbro is going to take the cake when it comes to the worst figures in the line overall. That said, this Indominus, although by no means is it great or even close to the quality of a Mattel version of an Indominus, was one of their more fun figures they released, I think, just because it's fairly striking looking, has some kind of fun action features, and also almost, if again you take off the exaggerated, head spikes and everything that we have on it, almost looked like the Indominus Rex actually does. So they did a better job on this one, kind of in a way, when it comes to actually capturing a dinosaur looking like it does on screen, because most of their dinosaurs don't look anything like they do on screen. But unfortunately, again, once they actually figured out what the Indominus looked like, they had to go ahead and add a bunch of weird spikes to its head and spikes down its back and stuff, and just exaggerate the heck out of an already hybrid and making it more of a hybrid. So a weird choice in the part of Hasbro, but it's not the first time they've done it. Just look at the Stegoceratops. They also did it with that one again, where they turned it into even more of a hybrid somehow. The figure does have some okay detail throughout. You know, some areas look pretty terrible, like the legs just have very muted detail moving down and just look super generic. But when you move into the body, some spots have some okay kind of, not necessarily vibrant detail, but decent looking detail. And then other areas are fairly washed out and muted, which is also very common when it comes to the Hasbro figures. The paint apps are all right for this, but it is another case of the paint ending before it reaches the tail, like we often complain about with Mattel. Clearly, Hasbro did the same thing. We also don't have painted claws on the figure on either the feet or the hands. At least Mattel can say they usually paint the claws on the feet of their Indominus, except for the dew claws. But the paintwork, again, although flashy and very memorable, is a little lackluster, again, as there's not a whole lot to it leading out into the tail. I feel like if they would have, ran the paint out onto the tail and also painted the nails, it could have been pretty cool. The figure also has some action features to it, and I could imagine them being fun for kids, but as you can see, they don't really stand the test of time when it comes to how good they're created, because the action features on mine aren't really working too well nowadays. But we do also have some articulation, but in typical Hasbro fashion, the articulation is fairly limited and doesn't really work that great either. And of course, noises on top of that, which they're just okay. But overall, again, it's a weird figure from Hasbro, but probably one of the more fun-looking figures that they released. Just by no means is it a great figure. If you are interested, though, again, this is another very long discontinued figure that can be pricey at times. Since Mattel kind of hit the scene and created a few Indominus Rex figures, the price has definitely gone down on this drastically. There was a time where this was ridiculously expensive, so you might be able to get it for a little bit cheaper now, and I do often see deals popping up where this one's not too bad anymore, so you should have an okay chance, I think, of getting a hold of this one for a decent price. So again, head to eBay, Mercari, somewhere like that, see if you can snag it and add it to your collection if you would like to, and of course, like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.